Well, hello, I'm Heather Granato, and I am here at Vitafoods Europe, delighted to be here with Mariette Abrahams, who is the founder of Qina, an absolute expert in the food, nutrition, and certainly personalization space. And we're here today talking about the 2025 B2B Marketing Benchmark from B2B. And Mariette, I'd love your thoughts. What did you think about the report? Was there anything in there that intrigued or surprised you?
Well, I read it all. I think it was really on point. I particularly like the AI part, of course, because I think that's really where the whole industry is going, that the industry needs to be aware of. And of course, the high demand for personalization is really where AI can come in and where it can be leveraged in terms of different technologies. But I think, yeah, the AI part is very interesting. I think the part where video is really taking off as a shift in consumer behavior and how they learn and how they want to receive content, that's really fascinating too.
Excellent. So, one thing that they also talked about in here was using influencers. There's definitely this interest in who do I know? I want to have a relationship.
Yeah.
So when marketers are looking at working with influencers, whether it's consumers or industry experts like you, how can they make the most of those relationships and actually build their brand identity through the work they do?
Yeah, I think that's really important because in order to work with industry experts, for example, there needs to be a win-win relationship, and of course, there needs to be alignment in terms of the perspective. So if you are building your brand and you have a specific, scientific understanding or perspective of how you want the product or solution to be seen, you need to make sure that the expert sees it in the same way. Because sometimes if there's no alignment, sometimes you can find the scientific, evidence that aligns with the narrative, and which doesn't necessarily align with the expert. And so I think there really needs to be kind of a win-win situation, but also it needs to be a long-term partnership. So if you're asking the expert to be part of your brand, to build the identity, you can't just say, can you be on an interview or can you write an article? It really needs to be because the expert is also putting their reputation on the line. And so I think there needs to be a long-term relationship. And then, of course, again, you need to be in different formats. So some people want to read an article, other people want to hear what the industry expert has to say in terms of their perspectives and their knowledge. And so I think there really needs to be a balance in terms of making it successful.
And I love that because I think it also speaks to how important it is to have alignment with your brand identity and the expert's area of expertise.
Exactly. Very, very. Otherwise, it will be short-lived, and then you need to find another one. And so they are also invested in, making the brand successful. Right. And so that's why it's very important to have fun.
So when we're looking at the nutraceutical space, and certainly the food as well, there's a lot of technical and scientific information. Now, you've got a scientific background. You understand this. But how do you actually recommend that they deal with communicating this? It's pretty challenging, even in the B2B space, to take some of this technical information. So how do you suggest marketers work to convey it in a way that's really understandable by the target audience?
Yeah, it's very interesting because what we're seeing, of course, now is that consumers have a very high interest in nutrition and health. Highly researched and searched topic. However, not everybody has a scientific background, which means that consumers want to get the knowledge, but they might not understand what it actually means in the end. So the difficulty that most marketers have is to find the balance between understanding the science, but not dumbing it down too much so that the consumer thinks, well, it's just marketing.
Yes.
That's the difficult part. So you need to take the science, maybe have experts help you say, this is what it actually is. Because maybe, people read the abstract and they read the conclusion, but they don't read the statistical analysis. And so that's where it really comes very important to work with the expert to say, this is what it really means. Now you need to use AI or use social media analysis, look at the threads on Reddit, for example. How do consumers understand this topic and how do they explain it in their own words? And then you take the expert explanation and then you take the what are the words that consumers use, and find a combination then to say, okay, this is how consumers understand it, this is the expert side, and now you need to find the balance, you need to see how people are reading it, how they're understanding it, the way you portrayed it and illustrated it, and then you can find the balance. But just doing one or the other could either be too scientific, or we dumb it down too much, and it's good science,
Right.
and then you lose the consumer as well. So you need to find that balance consistent.
And it's interesting because what you were talking about earlier, when we were talking about AI, might be an interesting way for marketers to use those tools effectively. Here's information from a scientific perspective that's been vetted. Here's information that's consumer. Here's something. Bringing that together and then having your expert on the team review it and then cut and paste it for appropriate audiences, which I would expect tools could do as well.
Correct. So the technology is now, you can use that kind of social media data, essentially. Then you use natural language processing tools to then understand what are the words that people are using, but you also want to understand what is the network. How do people never say, okay, well, I have a headache. It's always, I have a headache and my gut's not working and I have back pain as well. So there's always a combination, and as consumers are searching for like more holistic solution, you need to understand what are the connections and correlations between the different topics that people have. So you want to have natural language processing to use as a way. You want to have network analysis to have in a way. But what we also see is that people still use Google as their primary source. But then they go from Google and then they take maybe the information and then they go to ChatGPT. And then they say, okay, now summarize this product, summarize this science as if I was a 5-year-old. So they use, and then they go to Reddit and see what other people say about it. And so there's this kind of, they do their own way of research, but they use different tools to then analyze. So you can take all of those data points and then say, okay, how do I combine these different search intent, the keywords that they use, and then how do I now segment these customers based on the different correlations or symptoms or themes or topics that they are interested in. Then you can take that and say, okay, this consumer segment is 18 to 25-year-old. They talk about performance and stress. And then which ingredients are they talking about? Which foods are they having? Which wearables are they talking about? So that's how you can essentially, not only from a consumer segment, you can also do it from a behavioral point of view. You can do it at a geographical point of view. You can do it from a language point of view. And this is how marketers can really cement leveraging AI tools to really narrow down the messaging, write the messaging in a really relevant way.
And I love that because it also applies to the messaging that's going to come from an ingredient supplier to a brand. To help them understand this is going to be your consumer audience. So here's the information, the way you need to be sharing.
And then of course within the same brand, you could have different customers. So like I say, for this one you say that in that one with these words. For that group you say it in this way. So and that's how they can then personalize. Because then you can do personalized ads, for those individuals. So you can personalized webinars for those and video campaigns for that particular. And this is the future. This is definitely.
And that was actually the final thing I wanted to talk about. You're an expert in personalized nutrition. This is something you've been doing for ages of time. A long time. Before it became like the buzz. So we see in this report also this interest from marketers in personalized. How do you have personalization, personalized messaging? So what would you say? Is it just buzz, or what do you suggest as marketers are looking to personalize their approaches to marketing?
I mean, personalization is not a buzzword. It's not a trend. It's here to stay because in every corner, consumers expect personalization. Whether I have food, whether I watch a movie, whether I take a car, whatever the case might be, buy makeup, everybody wants some level of personalization. And so when it comes to health, it's only increasing right now. So we are at this really, really important point now in the industry where we see health and tech and food colliding. So people have their wearables, they have their sensors, they have their smartwatches, they have their glucose monitors, and then they use that to then shop for the right food in the retail store. And then they go and test their blood biomarkers to see how they're responding. So it's all getting linked together, which is really important for ingredients and companies and brands of food. Because now they need to take that information and they can't just look in one place. You can't just say, who are my competitors in the ingredient space? You now need to say, okay, what are these platforms saying about that? Are my ingredients and my products being recommended to them? So this whole level of personalization is becoming more complex, I would say, because of this integration of different industries, but it's certainly very exciting time. It's all market should take this personalization seriously, but at the intersection of food and health. That's really the message to take.
Well, Mariette, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I certainly appreciate it. And more insights from the 2025 B2B Benchmarking Report from BDB. Thank you for joining us.